Master Day woke before dawn as he had done every day for the past 40 years. The small wooden floor of his room at Waljungsa Temple was cold beneath his feet. Winter had come early to the mountains this year. He reached for his simple brown robes and dressed quietly in the darkness. The temple sat nestled among tall pine trees far from the busy streets of Seoul. Most people had forgotten about this place, and that was exactly why Day had chosen it. Here, the modern world faded away. Here, he could listen to the true voice of existence. Day walked through the empty hallway toward the meditation hall. The old wooden boards creaked under his steps. At 65 years old, his body moved slower than it once had, but his mind felt sharper than ever. His face, lined with deep wrinkles, told the story of a life spent mostly outdoors. His hands, rough and calloused, spoke of years of garden work and temple maintenance. The meditation hall was the oldest part of the temple. Paper lanterns hung from the ceiling, giving off a soft yellow light. Day sat down on his cushion and closed his eyes. His breathing slowed. The world around him grew quiet. Another day begins, he whispered to himself. 3 hours later, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, Day finished his morning meditation. He made his way to the small kitchen to prepare a simple breakfast of rice porridge and pickled vegetables. As he ate, he watched the mountains through the window. A light snow had begun to fall. "Master Day," a voice called from the entrance. It was Young, the temple caretaker's son. At 20 years old, Young helped with the heavier tasks around the temple. "The roof in the east wing is leaking again. Should I fix it today?" "Yes, that would be good," Day said with a smile. "Winter will not wait for us to be ready." Young nodded and left. Day finished his meal and went to tend to his small garden in the greenhouse behind the temple. Even in winter, certain plants needed care. The day passed as most days did, quietly, with purpose, and in peace. By evening, Day had taught a meditation class to 5 local students, repaired a broken step on the temple stairs, and written letters to 2 former students who now lived abroad. After a light dinner, Day returned to the meditation hall. Tonight was the winter solstice, the longest night of the year. In the old tradition, it was a time when the barrier between worlds grew thin. Day did not necessarily believe in such things, but he respected the ancient wisdom that had created these traditions. The hall was dark except for a single candle. Day sat on his cushion and began to breathe deeply. Outside, the snow fell harder. The wind howled through the mountains. But inside the hall, everything was still. An hour passed. Then 2. Day remained motionless, his mind clear as still water. Then something changed. A faint blue light began to shine through the paper windows. At first, Day thought it might be the moon breaking through the clouds, but the light grew stronger, taking on a color he had never seen in nature. It was blue, but not like the sky or water. It was blue like the heart of a flame, like something not meant for human eyes. The wooden floor beneath him started to vibrate. The walls of the ancient hall trembled. The candle flame danced wildly, then went out. Day opened his eyes. The blue light filled the room now. It was so bright that he had to squint. The air felt charged with energy like the moment before lightning strikes. "Who is there?" Day called out, his voice steady despite the strangeness around him. No answer came. Instead, the light grew even brighter. The vibration increased until the whole building shook. Small objects, a bell, a book, a cup, rose from the floor and hung suspended in the air. Day tried to stand but found he could not move. His body felt heavy, as if the air around him had turned to water. A ringing sound filled his ears, growing louder until it was almost painful. "I am not afraid," Day said, though he was not sure anyone could hear him over the noise. The blue light pulsed once, twice, 3 times. With each pulse, it grew harder for Day to keep his eyes open. With the 4th pulse, darkness took him. When Day opened his eyes again, the meditation hall was gone. He found himself in a room unlike any he had ever seen. The walls, if they could be called walls, curved in strange ways. They glowed with a soft light that seemed to come from within the material itself. There were no corners in this room, no straight lines at all. Everything flowed in smooth curves. The air smelled of nothing. Not the mountain pine he was used to, not the incense from the temple, not even the normal smell of dust and wood. It was completely clean in a way that felt unnatural. Day realized he was lying on some kind of table. It was not hard like metal or wood, but not soft like a bed. It adjusted to his body perfectly, supporting him in a way that removed all pressure points. He tried to sit up and found that he could move again. His brown robes were still on his body, though they looked out of place in this strange environment. "Hello," he called out. His voice sounded flat, as if the room was absorbing the sound. A section of the wall in front of him rippled, like a stone thrown into a pond. The ripples spread, and then the wall simply opened. There was no door that swung or slid. The material just rearranged itself to create an opening. Through this opening came a being unlike any Day had ever seen or imagined. It was tall, at least 7 feet in height. Its body was vaguely humanoid with 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head, but that was where the similarity to humans ended. Its skin, if it could be called skin, moved like liquid metal, shifting and flowing with every movement. Colors rippled across, its surface silver, blue, purple, never staying in one place for long. The being's face had no nose or mouth that Day could see, only 2 large eyes, deep and dark, with points of light moving within them like stars in a night sky. "Human," a voice said inside Day's mind. The being's face had not moved, but Day heard the word clearly. "You have been selected." Day sat fully, upright now, his hands resting calmly on his knees. He looked at the being without fear, though his heart beat faster in his chest. "Selected for what?" he asked. "Evaluation," the voice in his mind replied. "I am Commander Nix. I study species to determine their value." Day nodded slowly. "I see. And what is the purpose of this evaluation?" The being, Nix, moved closer. Its movement was smooth, almost like floating. "To decide if your kind should continue." A normal person might have felt terror at these words, but Master Day had spent decades training his mind not to cling to fear. He took a deep breath and looked directly into the strange eyes of the alien being. "Then I will do my best to represent humanity," Day said simply. For the first time, something like surprise seemed to pass across the flowing surface of Nix's face. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly. Day could see his breath forming small clouds in front of his face. The test had begun. Commander Nix had broken many beings before. In 200 years of evaluating species across the galaxy, the alien had developed a perfect system. First, show the subject how small they truly are. Then, remove all hope. Finally, offer a terrible choice. It never failed. Yet something about this human, this Master Day, was different. Most creatures showed fear when taken from their world. This one showed only calm interest. "Your temperature is stable," Nix said, the words appearing directly in Day's mind. "Your heart rate is only slightly elevated. Are you not afraid?" Day sat cross-legged on the strange table. His hands rested on his knees, his back straight, but not stiff. "Fear exists," he replied. "I acknowledge it, but I do not let it control my actions." The shifting colors on Nix's liquid metal skin pulsed faster. The alien moved around the room, touching various spots on the wall. Each touch made the wall glow brighter. "Your species believes itself important," Nix said. "This is common among primitive life forms." Day nodded. "Humans do tend to place themselves at the center of all things. But you do not. I try to see things as they are, not as I wish them to be." Nix made a gesture with one flowing arm. The walls of the room suddenly disappeared. Day found himself floating in space, surrounded by stars. He knew it was not real. He could still feel the table beneath him, but the image was perfect in every detail. "This is your galaxy," Nix's voice explained as the view zoomed out. The Milky Way became a small spiral among many others. "Your solar system is here." A tiny dot of light flashed briefly. Your planet is too small to see at this scale. The view continued to expand. Galaxies became mere points of light in larger clusters. Clusters became parts of superclusters. The universe stretched out beyond understanding. 400 billion stars in your galaxy alone, Nix continued. Trillions of planets. And beyond your galaxy, billions more galaxies. Each with its own worlds, its own life forms. Some far older and more advanced than humans. Day watched the display with wonder in his eyes. Most subjects showed despair when faced with their cosmic insignificance. But the monk's expression showed only appreciation. It is beautiful, Day said softly. The display vanished. The room returned to normal. Nix stood perfectly still, studying the human. You do not understand, the alien said. Your entire civilization is less than a speck of dust in the universe. Your lifespan is barely a blink. Nothing you do matters on the cosmic scale. Day smiled. Thank you for this beautiful reminder, he said. We are indeed small, yet we are still part of this magnificence. The drop of water is small, but it is still the ocean. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Frost began to form in the corners of the room. Nix had not expected this response. You speak in metaphors, Nix said. This suggests primitive thinking. Sometimes simple words carry deep truth, Day replied. Nix moved closer to Day. The alien's eyes, like miniature galaxies, studied the human's face carefully. I have evaluated 17 species before yours, Nix said. All failed to demonstrate sufficient value to continue existing. Day's expression became more serious but still showed no fear. What happened to them? He asked. They were removed. Their planets repurposed. Day closed his eyes for a moment, taking in this information. When he opened them again, they were clear and focused. And what criteria do you use to determine value? He asked. Nix made a motion that might have been the alien equivalent of a shrug. Intelligence, resource management, genetic potential, social cohesion, psychological resilience. And compassion? Day asked. Do you measure that? Compassion is inefficient, Nix replied. Species that prioritize weak members over strong ones tend to collapse eventually. Day nodded thoughtfully. I see. And what is your next test for me? The question seemed to surprise Nix. Most subjects begged for their lives at this point. They did not ask about the testing process itself. The next test will examine your psychological limits, Nix said. But first, I must understand how your mind works. The alien touched the wall again. A section opened, and a small floating device entered the room. It was round and silver, about the size of a baseball with tiny lights blinking on its surface. This will scan your brain activity, Nix explained. It will not harm you, but you will feel a slight pressure. The device floated toward Day, stopping, just above his head. It began to emit a soft humming sound. Day felt a strange sensation, like fingers gently pressing against his thoughts. Relax your mental barriers, Nix instructed. I have none, Day said. My thoughts are open. The devices. Lights blinked faster. Images began to flash through Day's mind. His childhood in a small village, his decision to become a monk at age 20, his years of study, his struggles with doubt, his eventual peace. The device showed Nix everything. Day's memories, his emotions, his beliefs. Most beings fought against such intrusion. Day simply allowed it to happen, observing his own memories as they passed by like leaves on a stream. After several minutes, the device retreated. Nix stood very still, processing the information. Your neural patterns are unusual, the alien finally said. You have trained yourself to separate observation from reaction. This is uncommon in your species. It is the result of many years of practice, Day explained. The mind can be trained just like the body. Nix touched the wall again. The room changed. The strange table disappeared, replaced by a simple wooden floor. The walls transformed to look like the meditation hall of Woljungsa Temple. Even the Smell of pine and incense appeared. Is this better? Nix asked. Does this environment comfort you? Day looked around at the perfect recreation of his temple. He could even hear the distant sound of wind in the trees. It is a good illusion, he said, but I do not need familiar surroundings to be at peace. The room temperature dropped another few degrees. Dai could now see his breath forming small clouds when he spoke. Most subjects perform better in familiar settings, Nick said. Their stress levels decrease. Attachment to familiar things is a source of suffering, Day replied. When we cling to what we prefer, we create our own pain when it is taken away. Nix moved around the illusory temple, studying the simple objects. The meditation cushion, the wooden bell, the scroll with calligraphy on the wall. Your species has great capacity for self-deception, the alien observed. You create meanings where none exist. Perhaps, Day said. Or perhaps we recognize meanings that are not immediately obvious. Nix made a gesture and the temple illusion disappeared. They were back in the strange curved room with glowing walls. But now there was a second table beside Day's. On it lay what appeared to be another human. It was a woman, perhaps 40 years old, with short black hair. She wore a white lab coat over simple clothes. Her eyes were closed and she appeared to be sleeping. This is scientist Hana, Nix said. She was collected 3 weeks ago from a research facility in your country. Her mind was not as resilient as yours. Day looked at the woman with concern. Her face showed signs of stress even in sleep. There were dark circles under her eyes and tension in her jaw. What did you do to her? Day asked. The same tests I will perform on you, Nix replied. She failed. The temperature in the room continued to drop. Frost now covered most of the surfaces. When Nix moved, the alien's flowing skin seemed to move more slowly, as if affected by the cold. We will begin the second test now, Nix said. Are you prepared? Day took a deep breath. He looked at Hana once more, then back at the alien. I am ready, he said. The room grew colder still. Scientist Hana opened her eyes slowly. She looked confused at first, then afraid as she remembered where she was. When she saw Day sitting nearby, her expression changed to surprise. Another human, she said, her voice rough from lack of use. They took you too. Day nodded gently. Yes, my name is Day. I am a monk from Woljongsa Temple. Hana sat up on her table. She looked tired and thin, as if she had not eaten well for days. Her hands shook slightly. I am Hana. I was a research scientist at the National Institute. She looked around the frost-covered room, then at Nix. Have you told him what happens to those who fail? Nix moved closer to them both. The alien's flowing skin seemed slower now in the cold room. The monk will learn soon enough, Nix said. The words appeared in both humans' minds at once. He has passed the first test. Now we will see how you both handle the second. Day looked at Hana with kind eyes. How long have you been here? 3 weeks, I think. It's hard to know for sure. She lowered her voice. They want to know if Earth deserves to exist. They've destroyed other worlds before. Day nodded calmly. Commander Nix has explained this. Hana looked at him with disbelief. And you're not afraid? These beings have technology we can't even understand. They can wipe out our entire planet. Fear would not help us now, Day said simply. Nix touched the wall. A small opening appeared, and another device floated into the room. This one was larger than the brain scanner, shaped like a flat disc about 2 feet across. The second test examines pain response, Nix explained. Most intelligent species will betray their principles when faced with sufficient physical distress. The disc floated to the center of the room, then stopped and began to glow with a soft red light. This device creates neural stimulation, Nix continued. It activates pain receptors without causing physical damage. The sensation is real, but no harm comes to your body. Hana's face went pale. She began to breathe faster. No, please. Not again. Day looked at her with concern, then at Nix. You have already tested her this way? Many times, Nix replied. Her responses were informative. Humans appear to value their individual survival above all else. That's not fair, Hana said, her voice stronger now despite her fear. You pushed me beyond what anyone could bear. You made me feel like I was burning alive. And you told me what I wanted to know, Nix said. About your weapons, your defense systems, the weaknesses of your leaders. Hana looked down, shame on her face. I told them everything, she said to Day. I couldn't stand the pain, I'm sorry. Day reached across the space between their tables and gently touched her hand. You have nothing to be sorry for. The floating disc began to pulse. The red light grew stronger. Now you will both experience the test together, Nix said. The one who asks for it to stop first will determine how we proceed with the evaluation of your species. Day took a deep breath and straightened his back. He folded his hands in his lap and closed his eyes briefly. I am ready, he said. Hana tried to copy his posture, but her body was tense with fear. I can't do this again, she whispered. The disc pulsed one final time and the test began. At first, there was only a mild warming sensation. Day felt it spread across his skin like the heat from the sun on a summer day. But within seconds, the feeling grew more intense. What had been comfortable warmth quickly became a burning sensation. Hana gasped. Her hands gripped the edges of her table so hard that her knuckles turned white. The burning feeling grew worse. Day felt as if his robes were on fire, as if his skin was beginning to blister and peel. He knew it was not real. He could see that his body was unchanged, but the pain signals in his brain were undeniable. Focus on your breathing, he said to Hana through clenched teeth. The pain is real, but suffering is a choice. Hana tried to follow his advice. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. But when the pain increased again, she cried out. I can't, she screamed. Please make it stop. Nix did not respond or stop the test. The alien simply watched, studying their reactions. Day felt the pain reach levels he had never experienced before. It was as if every cell in his body was being burned from the inside out. His muscles tightened, sweat ran down his face. But he did not cry out. Instead, he turned his attention inward, using techniques he had practiced for decades. He acknowledged the pain. He observed it closely, but he separated himself from it, recognizing that pain was just information, intense, overwhelming information, but not something that defined him. A single tear ran down his weathered cheek, but he made no sound. Hana was not faring as well. She thrashed on her table, screaming and begging for the pain to end. Please, I'll tell you anything, just stop. After what seemed like hours but was probably only minutes, Nix finally gestured. The disc stopped pulsing, and the pain began to fade. Hana collapsed on her table, sobbing quietly. Day took several deep breaths, then opened his eyes. He looked at Nix with a gaze that held no anger, only calm observation. The pain is real, he said, his voice steady despite what he had just experienced. But suffering is a choice. I acknowledge the pain without letting it become suffering. As he spoke these words, something strange happened. The frost that had been forming on the walls began to spread more rapidly. Icicles formed on the ceiling. The temperature dropped so low that when Nix moved, the alien's flowing skin made a crackling sound. For the first time, Nix seemed uncomfortable. The alien moved to the wall and touched it in several places, apparently adjusting the environmental controls. Your response is not in our prediction models, Nix said to Day. Most beings break under that level of stimulation. I broke, Hana said bitterly. Every time. Day looked at her with compassion. You did not break. You simply responded, as any normal person would. There is no shame in that. Nix studied them both. The woman's responses match our models for human behavior. Yours do not. This requires further investigation. A section of the wall opened, and a third being entered the room. This alien was similar to Nix, but smaller, with skin that flowed in patterns of green and blue rather than silver and purple. Second Commander Tejo, Nick said. Observe the monk. His neural patterns and pain response are abnormal. The new alien moved closer to Day, studying him with the same galaxy-like eyes. How did you maintain control during the pain test? Tejo asked, the words appearing in Day's mind. I did not try to control the pain, Day explained. I accepted it. When we fight against reality, we create our own suffering. Tejo turned to Nix. This subject is different from the others we have tested. Perhaps we should modify our approach. The protocols are clear, Nix replied. We must continue with the standard evaluation. Tejo seemed hesitant. The temperature anomaly concerns me. The ship's systems are being affected. For the first time, Day noticed that the cold in the room was not just uncomfortable, it was unusual. It seemed to be centered around him, spreading outward like ripples in a pond. What is causing this cold? He asked. Both aliens turned to look at him. We do not know, Nix admitted. It began when you were brought aboard and has grown stronger with each test. None of our previous subjects has caused such an effect. Hana had stopped crying and was watching with interest. It's like the ship is responding to him, she said. Or something else is. Nix made a dismissive gesture. The third test will begin after a rest period. Your biological functions require recovery time. The alien touched the wall, and a section opened to reveal a smaller room. You will remain here until the next phase, Nix said. Food and water, suitable for humans, will be provided. Nix and Tejo left through another opening in the wall. When they were gone, Hana turned to Day. How did you do that? She asked. How did you withstand the pain? Day smiled gently. Many years of practice. The mind can be trained to observe without attachment. Hana shook her head. But the cold, that's not just you, is it? Something else is happening here. Day looked around at the frost-covered walls. I do not know, but I sense that we are not alone in this evaluation. The room grew colder still, as if in response to his words. Days passed in the small room. Or perhaps it was weeks. Time worked differently on the alien ship. The walls provided soft light that dimmed at regular intervals, creating an artificial day and night. Food appeared through a small opening twice during each day. It was bland but filling. Day spent much of his time in meditation. He sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, breathing slow and steady. The frost that covered the walls did not seem to bother him. Hana watched him with growing interest. At first she had kept to herself, still ashamed of how she had broken under the alien's tests. But slowly Day's calm presence began to affect her. Will you teach me? She asked on what might have been the third day. Teach me how to control the pain. Day opened his eyes and smiled. I cannot teach you in a few days what took me decades to learn, but I can show you the first steps. For the next several sleep cycles, Day guided Hana in basic meditation techniques. He taught her how to focus on her breathing, how to observe her thoughts without judgment, how to sit with discomfort without trying to escape it. The pain itself is not the problem, he explained. It is our reaction to the pain that creates suffering. Hana was a quick learner. As a scientist, she approached meditation with the same focused attention she gave to her research. I'm starting to understand, she said after a particularly good session. Pain is just information. We can choose how to process that information. Day nodded. Exactly. And the same is true for fear. The door to their room suddenly opened. Commander Nix stood there, the alien's flowing skin moving sluggishly in the extreme cold. It is time for the next test, Nix announced. Day stood up smoothly despite his age. Hana rose more slowly, but her face showed determination rather than fear. We are ready, Day said. Nix led them through winding corridors. The cold seemed to follow them, spreading frost wherever they went. Other aliens they passed looked at Day with what might have been curiosity or concern. They entered a large chamber with a domed ceiling. In the center was a raised platform surrounded by floating screens, showing images of Earth from space. Second Commander Tejo was already there, along with several other aliens. The Council of Evaluation has convened, Nix announced. Your species has reached a critical point in its assessment. Day and Hana stood side by side on the platform. The room was even colder than their holding cell had been. The alien's breath was visible in the air, condensing into small clouds with each exhalation. Before we continue, Taiho said, we must understand the temperature anomaly. Our systems cannot function properly under these conditions. Nix made a dismissive gesture. The protocol must be followed regardless of environmental factors. The protocol assumes standard testing conditions, Taiho countered. These conditions are not standard. Day watched this exchange with interest. It seemed there was disagreement among the aliens about how to proceed. Perhaps I can help, he offered. What would you like to know about the cold? All the aliens turned to look at him. You claim responsibility for this effect? Nix asked. No, Day said. I merely observed that it seems connected to our interaction. It grows stronger when you attempt to break me, and when I remain unbroken. Hana spoke up. As a scientist, I would suggest this indicates an unknown variable in your experiment, something you did not account for in your models. Taiho moved closer to them, the alien's green-blue skin rippling slowly. The human scientist makes a valid point. Our models may be incomplete. The models have worked for 17 previous species, Nix insisted, but none of those species were human, Day said quietly. There was a moment of silence in the chamber. Then Nix touched one of the floating screens. It expanded to show images of Earth, cities, forests, oceans, people. Humans are not special, Nix said. You fight wars. You destroy your environment. You exploit your own kind. These behaviors are common among primitive species. We are flawed, Day agreed, but we are also capable of growth. Show them, Taiho suggested to Nix. Show them what is at stake. Nix seemed to consider this, then touched another screen. The images changed. Now they showed a massive chamber filled with what looked like large glass pods. Inside each pod was a human, suspended in clear liquid, eyes closed as if sleeping. These are the others we have collected, Nix explained. 1,000 humans from different regions of your planet. They remain in stasis until the evaluation is complete. Day felt his heart beat faster, but he kept his expression calm. Hana gasped beside him. What happens to them if we fail your tests? She asked. They will not return to Earth, Nix said. They will be studied further, then repurposed. And if we pass? Day asked. They will be returned unharmed, with no memory of their time here. Day closed his eyes briefly, taking in this information. When he opened them, he looked directly at Nix. So the fate of these people depends on our performance in your tests? Yes, Nix confirmed. And potentially the fate of your species. Will you beg for their lives now? Taiho asked Day. Most species do at this point. Day considered the question carefully. He looked at the pods containing the sleeping humans, men, women, even some children. Then he looked at Hana, who was watching him with hope in her eyes. I will not beg, he said finally, but I will offer you something instead. The cold in the room intensified. Frost crept across the floating screens, partially obscuring the images. What could you possibly offer us? Nix asked. A chance to learn, Day replied. You say you have evaluated 17 species before humans. Each time you tested them until they broke, then judged them as failures. But what have you learned from this process besides confirming your own assumptions? The aliens looked at each other. For once, even Nix seemed uncertain. Your tests are designed to break beings, Day continued. And when they break, you see this as proof of their weakness. But consider this. Perhaps true strength is not found in never breaking, but in how we respond when we are broken. Hana nodded. As a scientist, I know that sometimes the most valuable data comes from unexpected results. When an experiment fails to confirm our hypothesis, we learn more than when it simply confirms what we already believed. Taiho turned to Nix. The human speaks wisdom. Our evaluation methods may be flawed. The protocols have been used for thousands of years, Nix insisted, but with less certainty than before. And in all that time, Day asked gently, has any species ever passed your tests? There was a long silence. Finally, Nix answered, no. The frost had now covered almost every surface in the chamber. The aliens moved with visible discomfort, their flowing skin stiffening in the extreme cold. Perhaps, Taiho suggested, we should modify the final test. Nick studied Day for several long moments. The alien's galaxy-like eyes seemed to be searching for something in the monk's weathered face. Very well, Nix decided. The final test will be different for you. The alien touched another screen, which flickered through the frost. New images appeared, Earth seen from different angles, charts, data streams. Your planet stands at a crossroads, Nix explained. Your technology has advanced to the point where you can either destroy yourselves or transcend your limitations. According to our models, self-destruction is the most likely outcome. And yet you still evaluate us, Day noted, which suggests there is another possibility. A small possibility, Nix acknowledged. Less than 7% probability according to our calculations. Those odds are not zero, Hana said. In science, even a small probability is worth investigating. Taiho moved to the center of the chamber. The final test will begin tomorrow. You will both need your full strength. What will this test involve? Day asked. Choice, Nix replied. The most difficult test of all. The screens went dark. The aliens departed, leaving Day and Hana alone in the chamber. What do you think they mean by choice? Hana asked once they were alone. Day shook his head. I do not know, but I sense that whatever happens tomorrow will determine not just our fate, but the fate of everyone in those pods. Hana looked at him with new respect. How can you remain so calm, knowing what's at stake? Because fear will not help us now, Day replied. Only clarity will. The frost continued to spread across the chamber, forming intricate patterns on every surface. It was as if the very air was responding to their conversation. Get some rest, Day advised. Tomorrow we face our greatest challenge. As they settled down to sleep in the frozen chamber, Day noticed something strange. The cold, which had been uncomfortable for Hana before, no longer seemed to bother her. She slept peacefully, her breath forming small clouds above her face. Something was changing, not just in the aliens' tests, but in themselves. When Day and Hana woke, they found the chamber transformed. The frost had spread everywhere, creating beautiful ice patterns on every surface. Their breath formed thick clouds in the freezing air. Yet strangely, neither of them felt cold anymore. It's like we've adapted, Hana said, touching a frost-covered wall with bare fingers. Or like something is protecting us. Before Day could respond, the doors opened. Commander Nix and Second Commander Taiho entered, followed by several other aliens. Their flowing skin moved slowly in the extreme cold, as if struggling against the temperature. The final evaluation will now begin, Nix announced. The Council has prepared 3 choices. The screens around the chamber flickered to life, cutting through the frost with bright images. 3 large buttons appeared on a panel before Day and Hana. Each button represents a different outcome, Taiho explained. You must choose one. Nix pointed to the first button. This option allows you both to return to Earth. Your memories will be wiped. The 1,000 humans in stasis will be kept for study. Your planet will be marked for future evaluation, with a high probability of eventual removal. The second button lit up. This option allows all humans in stasis to return to Earth unharmed. However, you two will remain here permanently as research subjects. Your planet will be marked as provisionally acceptable with oversight. Finally, the third button glowed. This option allows one of you to return to Earth as an ambassador of our kind. You will help prepare your species for eventual contact. The other will be converted to energy to power the return journey. The humans in stasis will be returned gradually over 5 of your years. Your planet will be marked as potentially valuable. Hana looked at Day with wide eyes. These are impossible choices, she whispered. Day studied the buttons thoughtfully. Is this truly the final test? To force us to choose between bad options? These are the only choices available, Nick stated. You have 1 hour to decide. The aliens moved to the edge of the chamber, watching and waiting. Hannah paced back and forth, her scientist's mind trying to analyze each option. The first choice dooms 1,000 people but saves billions on Earth, at least temporarily. The second saves the 1,000 but keeps us here forever. The third splits the difference, but kills one of us. Day remained still, his eyes closed in. Concentration. The frost around him seemed to thicken, forming intricate crystal patterns that spread outward. Something is not right about this test, he said quietly. What do you mean? Hannah asked. Throughout the evaluation, Commander Nix has tested our responses to fear, pain, and responsibility. Each time, the test was designed to break us. Day opened his eyes and looked at the aliens. This feels like more of the same. From the edge of the room, Taiho spoke. The human is perceptive. Nix made a sharp gesture. Do not interfere with the protocol. Day turned to face the aliens directly. I have a question before we choose. The aliens looked at each other, then Nix nodded. You may ask. In the 17 species you previously evaluated, what choice did they make when presented with these options? There was a long silence. Finally, Taiho answered. Most chose the first option, their own survival at the expense of others. And did any of those choices lead to a positive evaluation of their species? Another silence. No, Taiho admitted. Day nodded as if confirming something. He turned to Hannah. I believe this is not a genuine choice. It is a final attempt to make us betray our humanity. The room grew even colder. The aliens' movements became more labored, their flowing skin starting to freeze in places. Your time is running out, Nix reminded them. You must choose. Hannah looked at the buttons, then at Day. What should we do? Day stepped toward the panel, with the 3 buttons. He raised his hand, but instead of pressing one, he placed his palm flat on the surface beside them. I choose a 4th option, he said calmly. Nix moved forward quickly. There is no 4th option. You must select one of the 3. No, Day said. I reject the premise of your test. These choices are designed to make us compromise our humanity. The true test is whether we recognize this. The cold in the room intensified dramatically. Ice crystals formed in the air itself, hanging suspended like tiny stars. You cannot reject the test, Nix insisted, but the alien's mental voice seemed weaker now. I already have, Day replied. He turned to Hannah. What does your science tell you about this situation? Hannah thought for a moment. In scientific experiments, when we get unexpected results, we don't force them to fit our hypothesis. We revise the hypothesis. She looked at the aliens. Your evaluation method is flawed because it only confirms what you already believe, that other species are inferior and deserving of destruction. Taiho moved closer despite the intense cold. The humans speak truth that we have ignored for too long. The other aliens began to murmur among themselves. Nix stood still, the galaxy-like, eyes fixed on Day. For thousands of years we have tested species the same way, Nix said slowly. And for thousands of years, we have found them all wanting. Perhaps the flaw is not in the species you test, Day suggested gently, but in how you test them. The entire chamber was now encased in ice. The screens flickered and went dark. The panel with the 3 buttons cracked from the extreme cold. Something was happening that went beyond mere temperature. The air seemed charged with energy. Light danced across the ice crystals, creating rainbow patterns that shifted and moved. What is happening? One of the alien council members asked. I don't know, Nix admitted. Our sensors cannot explain it. Day smiled. It was a simple, peaceful smile that transformed his weathered face. There is more to humanity than your tests can measure. There is more to the universe than your science can explain. As if responding to his words, the ice began to glow with a soft blue light. the same light that had appeared in Day's temple on the night he was taken. Hana stood beside him now, no longer afraid. Your tests measure fear, pain tolerance, and selfish calculation. But they don't measure compassion, creativity, or growth. They don't measure our capacity to recognize our flaws and still strive to be better. Taiho turned to the other council members. I move to suspend the standard evaluation protocol. This species requires a different approach. There was a moment of silence, then one by one the aliens signaled their agreement. Only Nyx remained opposed. The protocol has served us for millennia, Nyx argued. Changing it for one unusual specimen is not logical. Not changing it despite evidence that it is flawed is even less logical, Taiho countered. The council voted. Taiho's proposal was accepted. What happens now? Hana asked. Taiho approached them, moving with difficulty through the frozen air. The humans in stasis will be returned to Earth with no memory of their time here. You two will also be returned, but you will retain your memories. Why? Day asked. Because you have shown us something we have not seen before, Taiho explained. We wish to learn more about your species, not through captivity but through observation. In 100 years we will return to see how humanity has progressed. Nyx moved forward. We will also provide you with a device, a small token of our technology as a sign of provisional trust. Dee looked at the alien commander with kind eyes. You have learned something today, haven't you? For the first time, Nyx's flowing skin formed a pattern that might have been the alien equivalent of a smile. Perhaps, or perhaps you have merely postponed the inevitable. 3 days later, by Earth time, Day and Hana stood in the garden of Woljongsa Temple. It was dawn, and the first rays of sunlight were just touching the mountains. The air was crisp, but nowhere near as cold as the alien ship had been. In Day's hand was a small metallic sphere, the device Nyx had given them. According to Taiho, it contained information that would help humanity prepare for the aliens' return. What will you do now? Day asked Hana. She looked out at the mountains, then back at the temple. First, I think I'll stay here for a while, learn more about your meditation techniques. She smiled. Then I'll go back to my lab and try to understand this device without taking it apart. Day nodded. A wise approach. And you? She asked. I will continue as before, meditation, teaching, tending the garden. He looked up at the sky, but perhaps with a broader perspective on our place in the universe. That evening, as Day sat in meditation, a thin layer of frost formed on the temple floor around him. It spread outward in beautiful patterns, then slowly faded as the room warmed. Somewhere among the stars, the alien evaluation fleet was revising its protocols for the first time in thousands of years. And on Earth, humanity continued its chaotic, beautiful journey, still unaware of how close they had come to judgment, and how a monk's smile had changed their fate. When visitors to the temple commented on the unexpected frost that sometimes appeared on clear days, Day would only smile and say, "It is a reminder that the coldest void can be warmed by understanding." And somewhere in the silence between his words, a greater truth waited to be discovered.